planning for this?
Welcome back, TPR Nation. This is your host, Micah Shalansky, with another episode of Tips from the Trenches. Now, you know how these work. We like to dive into details in adding massive values directly in client relationships because us, like you, actually work with clients on a daily basis. We work with individual financial planning clients and helping them improve their lives. So I love being able to share things that we've learned with other advisors so we can all grow together in adding that DMV, that delivering massive value. Now, in delivering massive value, sometimes that means we need to be a great team player. We need to work with other professionals, which I love doing, whether that is traditional other professionals, which could be a CPA, could be an estate planning attorney, or kind of non-traditionals. Maybe it's the real estate agent, maybe it's the mortgage broker, maybe it's a corporate buy-sell, what's happening on cybersecurity, right? All of those different things, we need to be able to work with it. But just because we need to bring in other professionals from time to time does not mean we stop looking at the important details. In fact, we need to look a little bit harder even when another professional is doing it to make sure they fully understand the client's goals and objectives. I could tell you dozens of stories about estate planning attorneys, and I'm sure you have a bunch, where you've heard something from an estate planning attorney or read their documents and it doesn't correspond with what the client's wishes were. So there's a miscommunication. So we have a big responsibility that's there. But what about taxes? What about looking at everything as well on the tax side? Let me tell you a little bit of a story of kind of what a CPA missed and what we had to be watching for. We were working with a CPA, really like them. They're in the lower 48 and working with this client for years doing Roth conversions. And we had recommended that doing X dollar amount of Roth conversions. And I chatted with the client about it and said, here's why we want to do X amount, but I want to run this by your CPA, make sure we're on the same page. And so the client was super supportive about it. We've done this for years. So I shoot the CPA an email. I do not loop the client in. 99% of the time, I want to talk professional with the other professional, right? CPA, whomever, to make sure we're on the same page before we loop the client in that communication, just to make sure everyone is not broadsided by anything. Everyone knows what's happening. So send this information over. We want to do X amount of a conversion. The CPA writes back, taxpayer, and says, you know what, Micah, that's great, but in fact, the client can even do more of a Roth conversion. And they can, in order to stay in this tax bracket, they can do X amount more in Roth conversions, which was really good. You look at this and you're saying, well, great. Well, the CPA is even advocating for more of a Roth conversion. I love that. But the CPA missed the IRMA limitations. The CPA forgot about Medicare. The client was over 65, was paying Medicare Part B, and she cannot stand paying more than the minimum she has to pay for Medicare Part B. It really aggravates her. So one of the things we're doing in our planning is really trying to keep her below that IRMA limitation. So I went back to the CPA, and now again, you can look at this and say, yep, my responsibility. I should have led with that with the CPA. I made an assumption that the CPA was going to be looking at everything, including Medicare. And so when the CPA brought the client into the mix, now I had to step back. Now, I don't want to embarrass the CPA at all. I want a great working relationship. So I sent back a message to the client that says, yeah, this is a great option. Now, the biggest thing we need to think about too is not just taxes, but total spending about Medicare. And I explained the earnings limitations, which the client already knew about, but I want to be really clear now that we have multiple people on board and making sure everyone understands that earnings limitations with Medicare. And I said, hey, option A, you can do what we proposed, which was option A is what the CPA proposed, right? You could actually go ahead and do that. However, it's going to come with additional, penalty, which is excess IRMA. Or the second option that you can do is what we're recommending. And what we're recommending, here's the benefit of it. It's going to keep you below IRMA. 90% of the time, I always want my recommendation to be last because that's kind of what we're thinking about in the top of our head. The client wanted to go with our recommendation, which is great, which is limiting their income to keep them below IRMA. So why is this so important? Is just because we get advice from another professional, we also have to look about it in context with the client's situation. And this is a quick way we can deliver massive value. What I don't want is in 2 years later, the client calling me being like, WTF, Micah, how come you did this Roth conversion and now I have to pay more in taxes? Because guess what? If it would have come up with the CPA and doing the tax return and the client would have been like, hey, I just got this letter from Medicare Part B. It says I have to pay more. What would the CPA say? Oh yeah, that's because Micah recommended the Roth conversion. I'm going to be thrown under the bus. We've all been there before. for. So I don't want that phone call. So what's the way I stay ahead of it is I want to make sure the client knows what this is and I'm watching for these things at the same time. So that's the big thing. When we're working with other professionals, how do we watch for these things? How do we make sure we're adding massive value? What's your checklist in your Roth conversion? Do you have a process that you go through that says, hey, I've checked for the IRMA limitations. I've checked for the next tax bracket. I've checked for future RMDs that they're going to have to do, right? To really make sure you're doing it, then share that with the clients. Clients love to hear about our processes, believe it or not, because it's the dishwasher rule. We're getting credit for the work that we're doing. They love to know that we have a thought process as to why and how we're coming up with certain things. So what is that process? Are you effectively communicating that with your other professionals as well, your COIs, but also with your clients? That's the action step for this episode. As always, until next time, happy planning.
Hold on before we go. Something that you need to know. This isn't tax, legal, or investment advice. That isn't our intent. Information designed to change lives. Financial planning can make you thrive. Start today, don't think twice. Be a better husband, father, mother, and wife. The perfect RIA, the perfect